If an abundant life is one lived by soul in a spirit of love, what does my abundant life look like? I spent most of June 2020 sitting on my front porch. I was on a COVID-induced furlough from a retail job that keeps my son and I insured. Beyond avoiding COVID, I spent a good portion of the month reading James Cone's work on Black liberation theology. Cone originally wrote while engaging in theological reflection on the Black Power movement of the late 60s and early 70s. It was my way of standing in solidarity with the grievances brought forward by the Black Lives Matter movement. As synchronicity would have it, as the month began, I first heard about Indigenous landscaping. Then, towards the end of the month, Nouwen's essay on power and love shook my world. These learnings came together at the perfect time for me. They answered questions I began asking after I reimagined both God and myself while working on my dissertation in 2015. However, it would take for the rest of 2020 for me to begin to understand the shape of my abundant life. So, as I understand it, what does it mean for me to live by soul in a spirit of love? A few years ago, a dear friend described me as someone with an academic mind and a pastoral heart. Others, some intending it as a compliment and others as an insult, have called me a storyteller. On the Enneagram, I'm a 4. This makes me something of a creative and a romantic with a need to stand out in a crowd. It also means I have a gift for finding value, redemptive value, in any experience. But how does that all come together to shape what it means for me to live by soul in a spirit of love? In early September 2020, my spiritual director introduced me to a poem by the Sufi mystic Hafez. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. In the following months, I allowed the imagery of that poem to sit with me. The first thing I realized is that, at least in our times, most people fail to realize they are prisoners. So some build cages for themselves. The systems of the world entrap others. Many dwell in cages within cages. But however they got there, the majority fails to realize they are imprisoned by a spirit of power. This means keys could rain down all night long and nobody would pick them up. The prisoners, far from being beautiful and rowdy, are subdued. They constantly craft how others see them, hoping to avoid the ache of being known. In order for those in cages to find freedom, someone needs to come along and rattle the cages. Those who are imprisoned need to be woken up to the fact that they're bound. Discontent needs to be stirred and perspectives need to be challenged. I see the world from unique angles. I find great pleasure in challenging the status quo. Some personality assessments label me as a maverick. Others say that I am my best when I am a reformer, or even better, a revolutionary. Moreover, I use stories, often from my own life, to introduce these new ideas. In other words, I am, at the very core of my being, a cage rattler. I love to use my academic mind in the task of stirring up prisoners to a state of beautiful rowdiness. But I also have a pastoral heart. I lived as a prisoner and know that pain. Being oblivious to your imprisonment drains the soul. Knowing you dwell in a cage is torture. So the last thing I want to do is leave people in their cages. It does not matter how beautiful the rowdy prisoners are. I need to invite them to freedom. But I can only invite them to break free from power and embrace love. The prisoner has to unlock the cage themselves. The prisoner is the only one who can open the door and step out. So after shaking the cage and stirring up the prisoners, I drop keys. Keys are invitations to believe that there is another way. Sometimes this means I model living by love. At other times, I embrace those who are brave enough to expose their true selves. I create a condemnation-free space that invites people to explore their blind spots without fear. So what does my abundant life look like? I'm a cage rattler and a key dropper. I invite those who live in prison by power to find their abundant life.